Hey everyone, it's Tyler the Antenna Man. For months, I along with Lon Seidman have spoken out against DRM encryption on the new over-the-air TV standard, ATSC 3.0. While some of the mess involved with it has been cleaned up with new certified tuners on the market, other concerns still linger, like the impact DRM will have on DVRs and network tuners. Lon and I are independent YouTubers whose concerns have mostly fallen on deaf ears within the industry, but now at least two consumer advocacy groups echo our concerns. Representatives of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Public Knowledge recently spoke out against DRM encryption on over-the-air broadcasts at DragonCon. DragonCon is the largest science fiction and media convention in the Southeast United States. It takes place every Labor Day weekend in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. The convention is 100% fan-driven and mostly made up of volunteers. You can learn more about DragonCon by visiting dragoncon.org. The two panelists who spoke out against DRM encryption on ATSC 3.0 at the convention were Meredith Rose, Senior Policy Counsel at Public Knowledge, and Corinne McSherry, Legal Director at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Public Knowledge is a DC-based consumer advocacy organization that promotes freedom of expression, an open internet, and access to affordable communication tools and creative works. You can support their efforts by donating at publicknowledge.org. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is a nonprofit that champions user privacy, free expression, and innovation through impact litigation, policy analysis, grassroots activism, and technology development. It's actually the same organization that brought public awareness to NBC using broadcast flags to restrict recordings of the show American Gladiator back in 2008. Is history repeating itself? You can donate or become a member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation by visiting EFF.org. Portions of the discussion about DRM encryption among the two representatives from both advocacy groups at DragonCon will be shown in this video. If you would like to watch the whole hour-long discussion, which I highly recommend, it's very good, the video is linked in the description. The discussion starts with a brief history of our current TV standard, ATSC 1.0, and how organizations like Locast tried to expand public access to local channels, but were shut down by the networks.
A bunch of different kinds of services spring up to try to provide people with alternative ways of accessing local broadcast TV if they want that for less than a cable subscription, for less than the sort of major TV networks want them to pay for it. So Locast tries to take advantage of another provision in copyright law. And this provision says, again, because Congress thought it was important that people have access to local community programming, they said if you're a nonprofit surviving only on donations, then you can basically get out of having to sort of pay a license to every different local network in order to convey broadcasting. Locast says great. They put themselves in place. They are nonprofit. They do take donations, and they allow people to sort of be members, like many nonprofits do. But they're taking advantage of this provision of the law that should allow nonprofits to also retransmit broadcast signals over the internet. This too goes down. And the theory here from the Southern District of New York is, well, you took donations in order to help, and some of that money went to expanding your service to more and more areas. So that is not nonprofit enough. So you're not cable enough, you're not nonprofit enough, you're not...
But you're also too much like cable.
But you're also too much like cable. Court rules against it, and they also shut down. So what we sort of see as a theme here is, look, there is demand for broadcasts still. People want this. The technology exists. That's not the problem. The problem is copyright law getting in the way of really what people actually want. And also, it's not just copyright laws in the way of them. It's also because the networks, they want everyone to pay to license their programming. The other sort of theme is that where we started with, the whole point of broadcast is it's taking advantage of a public resource. And there's a long history in this country where we sort of thought spectrum is public resource, broadcast builds on a public resource, therefore the public actually is owed, right? There's a public interest here, and there's a public right to access certain kinds of programming, and a lot of these networks are taking advantage of that. They're getting all the benefits and not sort of paying what I think of as the public price. We are not getting the benefit of our investment as the public, and that is a very unfortunate context.
While I wasn't exactly a fan of how Locast operated in the way it took signals of local TV stations, sent them over the internet, and essentially charged for them by disrupting viewing if someone did not donate, I understand the point that broadcasters shutting down Locast kind of goes against their obligation to operate in the public's interest and the public's right to access programming. Outside of the copyright issue, Locast did give millions of people easy access to local channels in a very innovative way, and shutting them down took away that access for many people in weak signal areas. The next part of the discussion digs into the current market situation broadcasters are in, why they are pushing ATSC 3.0, and the issue with DRM encryption on free over-the-air TV signals.
So to set up against all of this, if you are a broadcaster right now, on top of all of what you see as clearly an assault on your intellectual property rights, you're now facing competition from streaming services like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and so you have seen the sort of if you followed the spacing over the last few years, you've just seen waves upon waves of consolidation, especially vertical, up and down with programming. So NBC Universal and Comcast all sort of merging together into one unholy entity. And so they look around and what they see is not we are using a public good to provide a public service. They see, oh no, we're not making as much money as Netflix or Amazon. So why should we have to be burdened by all these public interest obligations when Netflix is not? Sort of ignoring that fundamentally these are different services. So enter ATSC 3.0. Again, with the trajectory of technology in the broadcast space, it has been how do we get more efficient use of the spectrum that we have so we get more people on it, we can deliver more content over smaller and smaller bands of spectrum. The first pass at this standard was developed by essentially a bunch of broadcasters getting their technical people together. They developed this ATSC 3.0 protocol, which has a bunch of subparts to it, and this is important. Now, the FCC has to approve whatever the new broadcast standard is, because they are the ones who have to mandate that receivers all comply with this new standard. You can't just have a bunch of private organizations go out and say, this is the new standard. They have to run it through the FCC first. Enter a YouTube reviewer of TV tuners. He posted a review earlier in the summer in which he pointed out, he went through and he had one of these early, sort of almost preprint ATSC 3.0 tuner boxes. And he posted a video which said, hey, I noticed that when I tried to use these to tune in to some of the ATSC 3.0 simulcasts that are going on my local stations, I got a DRM notice that my box is not allowed to view this broadcast. It's an ATSC 3.0 box. I don't know what's going on. And so he tried to chase down the actual broadcasters. He tried to chase down the engineers, and kind of no one would really give him a straight answer on this. So while this is happening, in the background, we have this same process that was going on with the original digital TV transition, where broadcasters want to use the shiny new standard. No one has the equipment for it yet. There's no affordable equipment for it yet. They say, well, we need the government to force a market for this. We need to force the transition over. Dear FCC, please mandate that all these new devices have to take ATSC 3.0. And the FCC was like, you guys have a lot to work out on your own. Like, please go talk to each other first. And so they have these sort of public working groups that are going on right now where they're running through the standards. And then this video happened in June. My organization, Public Knowledge, is part of these working groups. And it turns out that the broadcasters, in their sort of existential freak out about having to encounter another Aereo or another Locast or another one of these retransmission services, have baked in multiple levels of DRM standards into this full big package of ATSC 3.0 technical standards. And not only that, but if you want to make a 3.0 device, you must agree to the whole package, including the ones that were not approved by the FCC. You must go to the A3A. There's an acronym soup here that I will not melt your brain with, but basically the licensing body that sets the standards is a private organization and is run exclusively basically by broadcasters, and you have to go to them and get like the seal of approval with the like special sticker on it, and in order to do that you have to agree to what have turned out to be all kinds of crazy DRM standards, including the ability to limit DVR recording, or turn off DVR recording, or auto-delete a DVR recording after 24 hours. And all of these kinds of micromanaging tools that would basically eliminate home recording. And so folks have been raising the alarm bells about this. We've been getting the runaround by the broadcasters who say, well, I can't do that. And then when we point to the part of the standard that has that, they say, well, you shouldn't have access to that part of the standard. Why are you doing that? So it's been a very frustrating process. And it is still up in the air and still sort of being negotiated in these public working groups. But
a quick side note about why Corinne put up air quotes when Meredith said the word public. You see, these public working groups involved with the rollout of ATSC 3.0 are made up of mostly broadcasters, which in my opinion isn't exactly the public and sort of a conflict of interest. Why wasn't I invited to be a part of these working groups? The industry knows I exist, and I feel that I represent antenna viewers better than some broadcast groups that literally use them as pawns to get more retransmission fees from cable and satellite providers. So why wasn't I invited?
It is still up in the air and still sort of being negotiated in these public working groups. But it is a concern that basically out of this reaction against things like Aereo and sort of low-cast and retransmission services, this fear of piracy has led to the baking in of these technical standards, which at the end of the day fundamentally would overturn on a technical level decisions like the Sony Betamax decision, which is a Supreme Court case from the 80s, which essentially said, yeah, home recording is a fair use under copyright law. This would obviate that on a technical level. And so there's a lot of concern right now. It's frustrating because this is still several years off from being implemented as a practical matter. It is not going to happen tomorrow. It's probably not going to happen next year or even the year after that. But we are staring down the barrel of another major TV protocol transition, which could potentially have very devastating consequences for the way that just regular people consume broadcast television.
And so just to build on that a little bit, because there's a couple things. So one is the sort of like baking in the DRM is obviously troublesome and concerning, but not just because it's sort of like technically working around your fair use rights, but also because the way they're setting it up, we've seen it before. We've seen it before in the context of DVDs and DVD players. So back in the day, also, if you made a DVD player and wanted to market it, you had to get also a seal of approval from an industry group. And basically you had to show that you were complying with certain obligations. And one of the things that did is it meant that the development of the DVD player, technology was just hopelessly retarded. It was like basically printers, like there was a technology for a long time that people really liked and used a lot, but people really couldn't innovate because it was slowed down because they had to go and get the seal of approval from this industry body. And whatever it's in the past, we don't care anymore about those players, but that was like 2 decades of innovation that did not happen. And seems to me extremely likely that this is what's going to happen again.
I want to add to Corinne's point about DRM encryption possibly stifling innovation on ATSC 3.0. It's already happening with the HD Home Run. Here we have a great network tuner that lets anyone wirelessly access over-the-air channels on any device in the home, like a smart TV, smartphone, laptop, etc. With DRM encryption, this great piece of innovation, which has been an option for the public for over a decade, might become a brick since Silicon Dust can't seem to get their unit certified by the A3SA, likely from fears of it being used to start up another lowcast. Let's hear this point Corinne makes about how broadcasters are so concerned that they need DRM encryption for security, while not necessarily taking your security into consideration.
The broadcasters say, well, we need DRM, we need this encryption because security. But then I don't really explain what the security problem is that they're worried about. And in fact, the thing is that there's a different kind of security that we should be worried about, which is user privacy. Because one of the things that this is also going to enable is for broadcasters to do what every other corporation is doing, if it possibly can right now, which is collect information about users. So let's say your kid plays that quiz. Now, what kind of information are they going to get about your household, what you're watching, what you're doing, what is interesting to you, what isn't interesting to you? That is part of this transition too that is not being discussed really well. We've seen this with smart TVs already, like Samsung got busted for this, but lots of other smart TVs and other devices are, information that they're collecting is just going over the internet for anyone to seize if they want and know how to do it, which is, I don't know how to do it, but trust me, there's lots of people that do. It's not that hard. And are they investing the time to actually encrypt that bit as opposed to, imposing encryption on you that only they control, right? Which is really different. And it comes back to kind of the theme of, at least for EFF, we always think you should be in control of your own device. You should be in control of the information that is being collected about you by your device. You should be able to open up that device, inspect it, figure out what it's up to, what it's doing, and then actually control what it's doing so that it actually serves your interests and not the interests of the person who sold it to you. This is yet another area where there's a lot of powers that be that are moving us away from that place. Now, the one thing I will say is I don't think, it is my impression, that the FCC understands this. They see that this is a thing that might happen. They are worried about it, is my understanding. And at some point, I think there's going to be a request for sort of public commentary.
There's a lot of shenanigans going on, and it's a lot of, I don't want to call it cloak and dagger, that might be overselling it a bit, but, a lot of stuff that has not been forthcoming about how this is supposed to work. Things like finding out there's a DRM standard incidentally because somebody who does YouTube reviews of tuner boxes flagged this, and then the entire public interest community went, wait, what? It's a complicated process. It is going to take a few years, really, to get the ball rolling, but as Corinne said, this is potentially enormous impacts on the public for a lot of reasons, and there's a lot more weird hiccups around this version of the transition standard.
The following point Meredith is about to make is extremely valid. Not a single person in the broadcast industry should be able to dispute it, but I'm sure they will.
One of the frustrating things about telecommunications advocacy in the last couple of decades is that people really do get blinded by these new business models. And they, so we have situations where broadcasters are like, well, why do we have to do public interest obligations? Netflix doesn't have to do public interest obligations. It's like, well, because Netflix doesn't have a wireless spectrum license. And Netflix doesn't reach everybody.
That's the correct answer. I've heard time and time again from industry executives that local TV stations need DRM encryption to compete with streaming services like Netflix. Newsflash, if you're a local TV station, you are not a streaming service. You operate a broadcast TV license obligated to serve the public. Want DRM to protect valuable content? Nothing is stopping you from starting a streaming service. Go ahead, do it. Don't want the benefits of a broadcast TV license? Give it up to an organization that will better serve the public. Independent broadcast groups, colleges, local municipalities, cities, and churches would love to take it off your hands. I truly appreciate Public Knowledge and the Electronic Frontier Foundation for speaking out against DRM encryption, along with DragonCon for hosting the discussion. It assures me that my concerns are valid and now backed up by at least 2 consumer advocacy groups, one that literally fought the broadcast flag over a decade ago. Let's not let history repeat itself. While I hear the broadcaster's point of view about DRM, I'm not as sympathetic about it from the way DRM encryption was prematurely turned on and locked some viewers out of accessing local channels on ATSC 3.0 tuners. The fact that broadcasters behave this badly in such an early stage of ATSC 3.0 has me concerned about the future of free over-the-air TV. Sure, most ATSC 3.0 set-top boxes on the market now work with DRM encrypted channels, but I'm concerned that DRM opens the door for TV stations to restrict network tuners, which they kind of already are, DVR recordings, which they tried in the past, and possibly charge for access to local channels down the road as retransmission fee revenue dries up from cord cutting. Thankfully, the whole DRM encryption thing is not set in stone yet. We are still in the very early stages of ATSC 3.0. The FCC does have the ability to prohibit broadcasters from using DRM in some way, shape, or form, and I expect them to hold a public comment period at some point. We as the public need to decide whether or not we are okay with DRM encryption on over-the-air TV broadcast signals. The broadcasters claim that it's needed to keep valuable content on free over-the-air TV, so it is possible that some programming like live sports might disappear without it. At the same time, I don't think it's fair to restrict the consumer's right to access content the way they want to, whether it be through recordings or on multiple devices with a network tuner like the HG Home Run. Make sure to support the organizations mentioned in this video by either donating directly to them or subscribing to their YouTube channels. Links are in the description. Please share this video as well, since it's a very important topic that needs to reach as many people as possible, being that it will have a direct impact long term on anyone who uses an antenna for free over-the-air TV. Additional thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon or is a member of my YouTube channel. If my videos helped you cut the cord, or if you just think they're cool and would like to help support them while gaining exclusive perks, visit patreon.com/antennaman or click the join button in this video, and you can also click the thanks button. Like my Facebook page at facebook.com/antennamanpa or sign up to my email list linked in the description below. Stay tuned to my YouTube channel for more cord cutting and antenna related videos, and have an awesome day.